The way we do the roundtables, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is we started doing these with specific discussant topics, just so that we have a way of introducing topics to people, gather around areas of interest. We've had previous roundtables where we have focused on police, law enforcement whistleblowers, healthcare whistleblowers. We did a really, what turned out to be a very interesting and powerful session on whistleblowers discussing their family issues, and we talked about some of the research related to the intergenerational transmission of trauma or secondary trauma, or children who are surviving a trauma. As many of you know, the what our children learn from us may very well be what they carry into adulthood as traumatic stress reactions without even knowing that they are suffering from the trauma. And I think we see some of that same cyclical behaviors with bullying. So I find that a lot of what we do can be very interconnected, and that there is a lot of commonalities across some of the whistleblower issues. We do these roundtables mostly as a focus on the mental health issues. So I'll do my one little commercial. So this was my book that came out with Martina Buck at the end of last year on the psychosocial impacts of whistleblower retaliation. We look at bullying from as a domain of retaliation. So I might even see retaliation a little differently than some of the other speakers tonight. But one of my reasons for wanting to do this approach was because I thought we really needed to talk about the surviving the bullying. So a little bit of understanding it, but also like, what are the skills needed to survive it? And as we were preparing for this, one of the thoughts that came to my mind, and some of you know, I spent a couple of years in the Pentagon, and we had this presentation once on leadership because, military officers love to talk about leadership. And there was a presenter, and, big auditorium in the Pentagon, and he asked everybody to raise their hand if you've ever worked for a bad boss. Hands went up all over the room. And I'm sure if you're thinking it about right now, you could probably think about the bad boss, at least one of them that maybe you've worked for over the years that you thought was a bad boss. But then he asked the truly insightful question. He asked, who has been the bad boss? And only one guy in the front row kind of went, well, maybe I haven't had some good days. And so there was this one little admission. But we don't fully understand bullying and bullying behaviors, I think, until we start to understand some of our own behaviors and what we say or how we say something, and how is it really perceived. Because I have done some coaching along the way, and I've had people tell me, I don't know why my team just doesn't get it. I don't know why they don't like me. I don't know why. I'm doing all the right things. I'm telling them I appreciate them. I send them the little sticky notes. But, then you also look at, well, but the last email you sent was at 2 or 3 in the morning. That doesn't come across as sincere behaviors. And I'm using these as small examples of how we can misunderstand and misrepresent bullying and the boss who thinks they're not bullying. So somewhere in the middle of all of this is where we really live and work, and we have to figure out how we survive that. So lucky for all of you who have been logging in as I've been yapping away, we have a group of discussants tonight that are going to introduce themselves and that are going to sort of help guide us in this conversation. I'm going to ask that we give the discussants a chance to introduce themselves, to present what they do and their work. And then we're going to kind of open up the round robin part. And I'm going to ask that we make sure that we're being mindful of other people's time, that we're being civil, that we're being respectful. I know everybody has their own personal case and story, but I do want to make sure that we're not bullying anybody and that we're giving everybody a chance to contribute to the conversation. And I've said that I have a hope that these roundtables are not just simply webinars, they're jumping off points for further conversation and other dialogue and any other ideas or things that you may need from Whistleblowers of America or things we can do or be involved with. If you've got activities that you want us to support, again, this is all about the connections we make. So we're going to dive into the chat, to the Q&As. Excuse me. I'll do my best to keep track of everything and any questions. And, you know, please raise your hand. Please be, again, just sort of mindful. So I'm going to introduce our first presenter is Dr. Nan Lee. Nan and I met when we were in San Diego for the Institute on Violence, Abuse, and Trauma conference. I got to present with her. We had almost 100 people attend a session, which I just was so overwhelmed by. And I think the information and helping us set the stage today is what she will help us do. So, Dr. Nan, please introduce yourself more formally.
Thank you, Jackie. Yeah, I had a really good time at that conference, and we had a full room there too. And when I asked people to raise their hands, almost everybody in the room raised their hands, and there was over 100 people, and a lot of them were military healthcare workers too, which is an important segment of the society because we're looking at people who are like first responders who are there to serve and protect us, right? And that's the problem with bullying, is that it goes on in all of these domains. You know, no matter how much you want to help and serve and protect, you can be open to being bullied too. So my story is I was bullied during the Great Recession by a world-class epidemiologist at a world-class university who you would think that would not be going on because bullying is an epidemic itself. And I worked for her for 2 years. And the entire job was a bait and switch. And she underpaid me by $13,000 a year. So I had to take on additional jobs just to support myself. And because it was a Great Recession, of course, it was impossible to find work. And my husband had also been laid off. So after 2 years, I was so sick, I quit. And I thought for the next 3 years, I was never going to work again because I could barely get out of bed without having horrendous headaches, and my allergies were out of control and I could barely breathe. Finally, my brain kind of untangled and I got my strength back because I did do a lot of things to help myself, and I spent a lot of time looking at, you know, what I can do to deal with the stress that I was under because it was really horrendous. And sometimes I felt like the skin was actually curling off my fingers that I was under so much stress. And so I did a lot of things like breathing hard and exercising. And I would say also the community, finding a community was really important. And so I want to reach out to everybody here and say, I'm glad you're here. If you're being bullied, this is important, talking to others and listening to others speak on this topic, because then you don't feel alone, because your head will then tear you apart if you don't have anybody else telling you what's going on with you is normal and a result of being harassed day in and day out. So I actually wrote my own book and published it. There's a lot, I don't know, can't see it probably. 10 steps to overcoming workplace bullying. There you go. It's backwards. But I did put a lot in there about what to do to take care of yourself. And I also looked at game theory, which is something that I think is important when you're dealing with bullies. You know, you need to learn how to deal with what's on the game board and who's on the game board because of the harassment, the constant harassment that goes on. But I think this is a huge topic, and I think my approach to it has been more organizational. I have tried to look at what goes on in organizations. That's my background. I'm an organizational psychologist. And I've been interested in systems thinking in this respect and how these systems that the bullying comes out of are often closed, even though they look like they're open. Maybe there's a lot of workers going in and out, but often management doesn't have much movement in it, and people are joined together at the hip and self-protecting of each other. So I think we have a lot of work to do. I think that's enough for me now. Turn the mic over to somebody else to introduce themselves. And thank you, Jackie, for putting this on.
Sure. Thank you, Nan. Jerry Carbell, please introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do.
Got to get that mic button. Yeah, thank you, Jackie. As she mentioned, my name is Jerry Carbo. I'm a professor at the Grove College of Business at Shippensburg University and the president of the National Workplace Bullying Coalition. I'm also an attorney in Pennsylvania and in West Virginia. And I did my PhD work, my dissertation on workplace bullying, specifically looking at it from a human rights perspective, a corporate social responsibility perspective, and in a way, a Marxist perspective as well. I tend to view workplace bullying today at more of the societal level than the organizational level and the individual level for a number of reasons. One, looking at solutions, I think of the need for broad-based solutions that include strong laws with strong enforcement, but also go well beyond strong laws with strong enforcement. You know, includes things like needing to have a strong labor movement that is focused on the day-to-day and addresses workplace bullying. It includes changing the corporate hegemony that we have, especially in the United States, but also a number of other Western countries, that really supports and allows for workplace bullying. I got into this. I've been studying harassment and bullying in one way or another for around 30 years. I think the first thing that sort of pushed me this way was I worked in a Big Six accounting firm just after the savings and loan crisis. So that's a long time ago. And the partner's reaction to that was to take out to, in essence, blame the first level employees, the first level accountants. One of the partners I worked for at the time, I remember him saying that, he couldn't take a financial hit because he had alimony to pay to several of his ex-wives. And so he had to break promises to new workers. When I was in law school, Baker and McKenzie, one of the most prestigious law firms, had a terrible incident of gender-based harassment. And, it really changed my view of the law and what I wanted to do with the law. And then I ended up going and doing my master's at Cornell's ILR school. When I was working on that, the Seinfeld case happened. And if you remember that, this is where the media tried to make it out that there was this gender-based harassment case that was all about a Seinfeld episode, when it was really about so much more. And the media led to people to believe that, employers had run amok policing harassment when it was really just the opposite. I then went into HR, saw the problems with dealing with this from that standpoint, and then went into my own law practice and saw the problems with our legal system and how it does not protect targets effectively, and how there are so many gaps that we have to fill. And that's what led me to do my dissertation research. And in that, I worked on defining bullying from a human rights perspective and developed at that point in time the first rendition of the Dignity at Work Act. And since that time, I've published a book understanding, defining, and eliminating workplace bullying, assuring dignity at work. And I continue to advocate, educate, and engage in research through the National Workplace Bullying Coalition. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that introduction. And now I'm going to ask Jennifer Fraser to introduce herself as well.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Jackie. I am also a whistleblower. I'm in the kind of unusual position of being a whistleblower with my teenage son. 10 years ago, pretty much to the day, he, along with a number of other students, many other students, reported that they were being abused emotionally and physically by teachers. And then we watched very much things that Dr. Nan and Jerry would have seen. This, and Dorothy Susskind is an expert in the circling of the wagons, the degradation ceremony, all of the things that get that happen in institutions that cannot seem to handle in any proper, fair, or humane way perpetrators, what they've done, and protect victims. So the entire thing, all the way up to the highest government levels, we were talking Ministry of Education, Commissioner for Teacher Regulation. I'm in Canada. We started fighting the school and the school administrators, and then we, over a period of time, realized we were fighting the government, because the government was very invested in ensuring that private schools were never associated with abuse, because they saved the government so much money. So we ended up in national media. There was a CTV television investigative journalism show that we were on the front page of the largest readership paper, Toronto Star in Canada. And my son spoke up. Like, it was utterly remarkable to me to watch this teenager who had pretty much everything to lose, who was suffering from the kinds of things that Dr. Nan is talking about, extreme depression, extreme anxiety. And so I have a PhD in comparative literature, and what we are trained to do is to take different discourses out of their silo and put them into an arena and see if the conversation changes. So when I was being told repeatedly that I was hysterical and this wasn't a big deal and the abuse has gotten exaggerated and, you know, this is old school coaching. I mean, you can't imagine the things they trotted out. I said, fine. And then I went to the research, and the research in psychiatric research, medical research, psychological research, and then I hit the neuroscience. And all groups are very, very clear. There's extensive, documented, peer-reviewed, replicated research that says these forms of bullying and abuse do serious, serious damage, not just to the body, but to the brain. And that's where I wrote my book. I did a deep dive into the neuroscience because it was news to me. So my book is called The Bullied Brain. And the good news part of it, and this is what Jackie wanted me to focus on, is what we've learned is that all forms of bullying and abuse, they don't have to touch the body, but they can leave neurological scars on the brain. These scars, or the damage, the architectural damage in the brain, is visible on brain scans. And as Jerry would know, the law has not caught up. The law is out to lunch with the science. It's incredible. We're talking 20 years of extensive research documents this. And we still act like bullying and abuse is, you know, some sort of an interpersonal matter that needs to be sorted out with HR. So the good news part of my work is the subtitle to my book, which came out last year, is Heal Your Scars and Restore Your Health. Because, I mean, some people like Dr. Nan have the medical knowledge and the psychological knowledge and research to put themselves back together, but many people don't. They don't even know they have an injury in their brain. So the really exciting and empowering piece is all of us we have brains that are innately wired to repair and recover, and we just need to know the evidence-based practices so that if you in fact have been bullied or abused, you've been re-traumatized from whistleblowing and have suffered lots of trauma from that horrendous experience, the science is very clear that you can get better, and your brain is amazing at getting better.
Okay, well, Jennifer, thank you for that concise introduction. I think we're going to want to dive a little bit more into some of what's in your book. But my first question, I think, to the panel, and And I think, we also have members in the audience. I know we mentioned Dorothy's here and a couple of other people that we've all worked with. Is this idea that let me maybe ask it this way, do we or don't we have a clear understanding of bullying? How are we even defining this phenomena? Yeah, okay, Jennifer, I knew that would trigger you.
Yeah, I'll just say super fast. I was just recently asked to write a definition for a Massachusetts bid to change laws on psychological safety in the workplace. And so I was talking to experts, and I really thought deep about it. I didn't go to the definitions. I didn't do any of that. I said to myself, with all the work I've done over the last 10 years, how can I define it? And I defined it as any form, from a microaggression to a full-scale violation, any form of dehumanization. The second you say to a worker they can't go to the bathroom, they don't need a drink, it's not too hot for them, they can work more than 40 hours a week, they need to work weekends, that you don't care about their elderly parents or their children. The second you do any of those behaviors, you reduce them to their religion or their sexuality or any other aspect of non-holistic human being, you're dehumanizing. So there's no joke. Any joke that dehumanizes or limits a person, that's bullying. And if we had more time, there's things that I would say about why the brain is bullying other people in the first place. The science on it is incredibly fascinating and relevant to this because, of course, it's a cycle.
No, I agree. And, one of the things, for those of us who are in the mental health profession, we know I don't know if you could see that. We know the Bible, right? The DSM-5 TR. And they added bullying to the definition of PTSD when there is a serious, credible threat of serious harm. And we keep coming back to this serious harm. And what does that really mean? Is serious harm only a physical serious harm, or can serious harm also be a psychological harm? And I find it credulous that in this day and age, that when I'm in court or when dealing with attorneys or even other mental health professionals, that we're still arguing and debating that emotional abuse is an injury and it can cause serious harm. It feels like there are just some gaps maybe, or where things are not latched well. And I think Jerry wanted to comment, and I think I saw a hand in the queue. So Jerry, I'm going to go to you next.
Yeah, so defining bullying is what I spent my dissertation on, and I would say that we do know what bullying is, but the problem is that we let a lot of things interfere with that, and in particular what we let interfere with that is this idea of the business model and the corporate model. But when we talk to targets collectively, we do get a definition of workplace bullying. And in workplace bullying, the other thing that I would say is that, I define it as the unwanted abuse of any source of power that has the intent or effect to strip the target of their esteem, their dignity, or any other human right in the workplace. And I base that upon, dozens of narratives, dozens of interviews with targets of workplace bullying. And I think that we get into a problem when people use a much narrower definition because they believe for some reason that the employer lobby will be more receptive to it, and that the employer lobby will support passage of some legislation. It's just never going to happen. It never has happened. It never will. And the other thing that I would say is, yes, there's definitely psychological harm, and it can occur from workplace bullying, and it does in most cases, but for others it doesn't. And we need to recognize there's also economic harm, there's social harm, there's familial harm, and I think we need to take the approach that the Supreme Court and Justice O'Connor did in the forklift case, and that is that the bullying itself is enough of a harm that should be what is unlawful. So the behavior itself. And when we start saying you have to show psychological harm or physical harm, we get into this thing of plaintiff, open up your medical file. to the defense counsel and to the
Mm-hmm.
court. And then let's bring in experts and let's let the experts argue it out rather than hearing what the plaintiff endured and what they experienced.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think none wanted to join, and I'm going to ask people to use the raise hand because I thought I saw a question in the queue, but now I can't find it.
Yeah, I think Neekman Be a Diamond has raised his hand. I just wanted to ask Jerry
Okay.
to expound on something really quickly because we do have definitions for bullying, but they're called harassment, right? Because we separate people into classes, and I think that's
Mhm.
really the problem here is that we allow some kinds of bullying, but we don't address status blind bullying. So if
Mhm.
you're a woman and you're being harassed by a man, then that's the kind of bullying we're going to prosecute, right? So that's part of the problem is that we've what I call fractionated people up so that they can't come
Mhm.
together as a whole and advocate against this anyway. Neekman, I guess, or whoever else wants to go ahead. Thank you.
No, I think that's a really good point, and I should have mentioned it earlier. It was on my mind that bullying legally is different from harassment and discrimination, which we've had other roundtables focusing more specifically like that. But I think that what you just said about fractionalizing people is part of how we dehumanize them.
Mhm.
And then we don't have to listen, pay attention, compensate, reward, or care about what happens to them. Okay, so now I'm going to go to Neekman, who has probably been very patient with me.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Thank you. I just wanted to share I just wanted to say real quick that, of course, growing up, I was bullied. And of course, I experienced bullying, in school and college and at work. And it's true, though. Like, it is very dehumanizing. And I'll just share from my perspective. It caused all types of psychological issues. But the thing was, though, the way I grew up, though, you were taught to tough it up or whatever. So when I did share, though, I was told to shut up and toughen up. But so many years later, though, I did get counseling, and I was like, man, thank God for counseling, because the counseling helped me to better understand why I was mad, why I was depressed. I mean, I was so depressed at one time that I was barely eating, and I didn't even care. But ironically, when you're told just to eat and suck it up, that just made me feel, worse. So after getting counseling and stuff, it helped me to better understand, though, like my issues. And also, better understood, though, that I had to do things, though, that are therapeutic or whatnot, because I have epilepsy. And of course, a good friend of mine told me that you can have epilepsy, though, but don't let it stop you from living your life. So some people even get bullied, though, because of epilepsy, because of course I got to make sure I eat. I can't get too stressed out. It got so bad at one of my jobs because there was this lady. She was cussing me out and saying, and cussing me out and everything. And I got so angry, I had to leave. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. But of course, I'm learning from that. I'm learning I need to do things that are therapeutic, and I'm going to work from home instead of being on the job and things like that. And as a matter of fact, I'm working on a company called Pulsar, where we're working on the bully recovery platform. And I'm trying to do all types of things, though, to help with anti-bullying. I'm going to share my story, and if anybody like any information, I'll just share my emails and stuff in the chat, if that's okay.
Yes, no, I was just going to say, Neekman, if you could please put your information in the chat. I don't know if you did it before, but do it again. And I mean, I think, again, that's the idea, is that I want us to be able to come together around certain ideas and projects and have people work together. I mean, I'm a believer that, we should speak truth to power, but I think the second part of that sentence, or the first part of that sentence, should really be is that we need to be united in speaking truth to power, so that people really can rise up. I mean, I remember when the Army did that Army of One slogan, and everybody went crazy that, like, no, that's not how an army even begins to work. We are stronger together. So I appreciate that. I just saw that you you put it in the chat, and I'm going to ask Paul Pearson, who's my VP, to make sure that he captures that and he sends you an email so we can continue to follow up. So I also see Scotty White has put his hand up in the chat. So, and he's put his email as well. Scotty, did you have a question that you wanted to make, or did I miss something? Sorry, guys, I'm a little slow sometimes with the chat, and I got to go back and forth between a couple of different click here, click there. Scotty, are you, did you have a comment? Okay. Scotty, I don't know if you're having any kind of a difficulty with your audio. I'm not hearing you.
I'm not seeing a microphone on his thing, so I don't think he's joined on audio. Maybe if he could type it in the chat.
Or if, Paul, if you're in the background somewhere there, if you can help us. Let me see what's in the, I've got to go back and forth between the chat.
I promoted him to co-host. Maybe you could take it off mute now. Okay, I guess we could just come back to him.
Okay.
Jackie, Jennifer Curiera
Yes.
would like to speak too.
Yes, I just saw Jennifer too.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I am still in, well, I've recently been reassigned from my bullying situation. I'm a federal employee currently. I have almost 20 years of service to include my active duty military time. And I have exhausted every avenue available to me, seeking help for the harassment and the bullying. It's been awful. It's been a complete nightmare, to the point where, to make a very long story short, I had to disclose my medical diagnosis of PTSD to get reassigned and to go out on FMLA to get the kind of treatment that I needed for PTSD and trauma. And if I didn't do that, Lord knows what would have happened. And I was strategic about when I said that, because it was with the labor relations or employee relations representative present. So they knew that they have a major lawsuit on their hands. So I was reassigned through the reasonable accommodation process, but they are still bullying me in their own way, shape, and form. So for someone like me who has exhausted almost every avenue that's supposedly available to me, to include all of those BS people at EEO and the whistleblower organizations that say they're going to help, but they wrap it up as, oh, it's just bad management, and then they do nothing to correct the behavior. What kind of avenues are there for me to kind of, other than, going to find another job in the long term? That part I understand, but I can't afford to do it. And I was applying for jobs left and right, and they weren't coming. So for someone in my situation, what do I do?
Yeah, so first of all, I was gonna maybe ask Jerry to weigh in on this a little bit too, because I've called it the weaponized diagnosis. There are things, and I understand there are requirements for reasonable accommodation, but having to turn over your entire medical record, my understanding is that's not how that works, or it shouldn't be how that works. So, I mean, Jerry, what are some of your thoughts about that? I mean, this sounds like some of these legal issues shouldn't be happening, and what can we do, and how do you protect against that?
Yeah, so I mean, the ADA is actually the biggest area I'm looking into right now in terms of how employers use this to bully. And especially they do it by not accommodating people. So at least it's good that you were able to get this first accommodation. In terms of the medical information you have to provide, it's just sufficient enough to show that you have a disability as defined by the ADA and that you need an accommodation. When your employer asks for more than that, they actually violate the act. And so you should, file that claim that they have violated the act. The other thing is, while our laws are very weak, the one area that we tend to see success is retaliation claims, and they're building a retaliation claim for you. And I put in the chat there, document everything.
I've done that.
Detail, witnesses. And when you have that built and you get to that point where you're like, I need to do something, that's when you need to reach out, get an attorney, think about filing the retaliation claim. And unfortunately, the reality is, with the time and the litigation takes, the time the EEOC takes, you've already sort of identified what might be a necessary next step, which is at some point you do have to move on. And you have to let yourself know when that time is, because you don't want to get to the point where damage is irreparable, and you do exit is unfortunately too often a reality for targets. Shouldn't be, but we're not there yet that we have a legal system that prevents that.
No, Jerry, and I appreciate that, because I find that a lot of times, we will tell people you need documentation, you need evidence, but then there's a lot of misunderstanding about what is level of evidence. I mean, there's a big difference between your opinion, a fact, and evidence, and the proof.
Right.
And I think we see a lot of lack of knowledge around the difference of things that are, preponderance, clear and convincing, reasonable doubt. Any other little, and I hate to put you on the spot, but any little tidbits about what really is evidence?
Yeah, so I mean, one, we are at the preponderance of the evidence standard of retaliation claim. And two, yeah, the facts are important, but really what's key is, because you're in this area of retaliation, you're wanting to show what's the adverse employment action. And, courts vary. Sometimes you have to show tangible adverse employment action, being demoted, being dismissed, having responsibilities taken away, but something very tangible. For other courts, the intangible, the, treating you differently, micromanaging, and so on. So it's going to vary based upon where you're at. It's going to vary based upon the, court. I would recommend that if you feel like that retaliation has occurred, then you go and visit a local attorney.
Yeah, and I think we've got Scotty back.
Yeah, I've done that. I have at least 1,000 pages of documentation. I learned as a snot-nosed second lieutenant in the Marine Corps, managing federal money, the audit trail is very important. So I learned early on to do that. So I can't even tell you how much documentation I have. But when they asked me, they conducted a BS fact-finding investigation. They asked me for witnesses. I provided them with about 20 names, and they interviewed 2 people. So yeah, but I appreciate everyone's feedback. I hear you all loud and clear, and I know it's time to win the lottery.
All right, I want to go back to Scotty, because I think he might have his microphone. Scotty, do you want to try this again?
Can y'all hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
yay!
Yes, good, thank you. Well, this is the treatment, I think, for retaliation and bullying is different. One of my understanding is, and how do I find out a person who can really treat the condition better than somebody who's just general treating, PTSD? That's a question I have. Is there any professionals that are better equipped to treat that?
Yeah, so I think you're asking a really good question, because that takes us back to some of the earlier discussion as we're getting started. So I think, therapists who understand post-traumatic stress disorder, and not everybody does specialize in that. I mean, I remember once doing a training even with Department of Veterans Affairs employees, and they were not as sensitized to military culture and the PTSD ramifications. I think we are sort of on the dawn of a new horizon. That's why I'm so excited about Jennifer's book and some of the other works that I see coming out about bullying and gaslighting, and of course the work that Martina and I have tried to do, is because I don't think therapists fully understand what this is. Even in the DSM-5 TR, it will say things like being fired is an adjustment disorder. But again, being fired is an outcome of all of this other retaliatory actions. So that's why I said bullying is like one. We have in our whistleblower retaliation checklist, we've looked at 9 domains of things. I think we've got to be able to clearly make sure that we're explaining this as something more than, being fired, adjustment disorder. The first time I went and saw, I think she was an EAP counselor, she was a social worker, she listed what I had as job stress. And I thought, no, I've been an Army officer. I've worked at the Pentagon for 8 years. I know job stress. This is not that. This is much more loaded. And that's when I started to come up with the idea about it being systematic and targeted. And I do think we collectively, individually need to train more therapists in understanding that there's so much more to this dynamic than these one-off things that have happened that are causing people to have identity disruption, to have impacted prolonged grief, to have PTSD, to have depression, to be suicidal. When we did our initial survey, we found that 50% of our respondents had at some point contemplated suicide. You don't contemplate suicide just because you got fired from a job.
I understand that completely. I experienced that, and I got diagnosed too with, like you said, adjustment disorder, for the things I went through. And to give you some clarifications, what happened is that I uncovered some problems with a HVAC system in a laboratory, and it was spewing out mold, and I reported it to Office of Special Counsel, and they did an investigation, and then I got a report back that was unsigned. So what I did is I did a metadata request to find out who wrote the report. I found out that the Office of General Counsel wrote the report that was supposed to be written by the Office of Medical Inspectors. If you don't know, Office of Medical Inspectors are made up of doctors and nurses. And I reported that, and I did a data request to get information who actually wrote the report, but FLRA will not release information, so we had to go back to court to find out to get the unredacted names. So far as I know for a fact that Office of General Counsel wrote the report, and we know that the document was falsified for sure, because we subpoenaed during arbitration the transcripts. The transcripts did not match up with the report that OGC gave us during arbitration. And they had terminated me, locked me out of computers. They have, took my paycheck. They had removed me from the union office, or tried to remove me from the union office. Sent down security officers to remove me from the union office. I said, you don't have the right, because this is a union office, not anything to do with the facility. I said, you don't have the right to remove me from the office. I'm still a union safety officer. You can't remove me. And I said, and then they left. Then they come back and ask me for my PIP card. I said, I'll give you my PIP card as long as you give me some access so I can continue to protect my employees. And they said, okay, they will. But I was locked out.
Yes. So I
So
think some of those things that you just enumerated go back to what we were talking to Jerry and Jennifer about, is like, how do you document bullying or some of this systematic targeting behavior? So, I've also been looking in the chat, and I've seen a couple of comments about some of the research and studies that have been going on. So, and I know Jennifer's got some work. Niekman had mentioned a study earlier. I think Dr. Nan, you've done some studies as well. Why don't we talk about, what does some of the research say? And then I saw Viviane had mentioned legislation, because that's, if we had a repository maybe of some of those studies and some of the research. I know you mentioned, Jerry, that there's been legislation on the state level, but maybe there's a room for either more research dollars from the federal level.
Is there a best way to address this through civil court?
That's what I'm asking. I'd like maybe Jennifer and Jerry look like they might have some comments about the research work that they're doing.
Jennifer. I was just going to say Jennifer had her hand up. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say fast. Whenever I hear the word suicide, I feel compelled to jump in. I think it's super important. Like Scotty, when I hear your story, when I hear everybody's story, when I hear Jennifer's story, I just am like, yeah, that's how it works. I think many people on this call have experienced this. So where I leave to the experts like Jerry, what do we do legally? And to the counselors, Jackie and Dr. Nan, how do we actually, get right in there, mental health professional, and help? What I can say about the research that I think is really important for every single person to know who's going to take the very risky path of telling the truth, like whistleblowers do, as we see, you get retaliation for it, you get penalized for doing the right thing. It's completely psychotic. So when your brain comes face to face with the fact that your society, your community, your colleagues, your higher ups, people you thought cared about you, cared about the company, and cared about the health of other people, when your brain comes up against that and finds out that it's all a lie, the shock to your brain is colossal. Our brains are wired for connection. They're wired for community. So things that push you out of the community, put you into the out group because you dare to tell the truth and you've exposed other people, that is like poison. I'm not kidding. That word is not, it's not a metaphorical word. It's a literal word for what happens to your brain. So the neuroscientists will put it, this is my last quick thing. The neuroscientists will say, this is Dr. Michael Merzenich, who's one of the world's leading neuroscientists. He says, when the brain can't answer the question, like, I just did the right thing, why am I being punished? If your brain can't answer that question, and it can't, then all systems degrade. Just like you've had a blow, a traumatic blow, like a concussion, all systems degrade. This is why you suddenly enter into a suicidal swamp. This is why you have depression and anxiety. It's because your brain is self-destructing on the inside and nobody will tell you that. And they can see it on a brain scan and they won't tell you that either. And that means it's utterly within your own power. No matter how psychotic your society is, you have the power to stop that process by understanding that you can't answer that question, but there are questions you can, and start getting empowered by all the research on what you can do to keep your brain healthy despite this craziness we live in.
Well, thank you for that information. I'll let you know, after I won my arbitration, they did pay me $97,000 in discriminations. And then my fellow employees finally came forward and told the truth. And they told me the only reason why they told the truth because they did not know what was going to happen to their paycheck. They said, I cannot live 3 or 4 years without a paycheck. And they apologized to me, and then they testified in a later arbitration. That's the reason why they did not tell the truth, because they was fearful of what would happen to me, because they saw what happened to me. So that helped me to get through a lot of things, but the trauma is still haunting me.
Yeah, and I think,
and Scotty hit on two really important points that are part of the solution, right? Jackie, you're absolutely right. We need a federal law. State laws are not the solution. It's just sometimes it's easier to work at the state level. Scotty, you bring up two really critical points. One is we need strong unions who address this. Oftentimes that's where laws start. And unfortunately, most unions aren't addressing this. They don't take it seriously. And I think it's a culture of unions is the reason. It's sort of a history of unions and their acceptance of the business model. And then the second thing is those upstanders. And it was upstanders who, who would stand up and testify, or at least stand up after the fact and support you. We need many, many more of those.
so I see we have some more hands are going up. I see Vivian and Nickman again. So Viv, you haven't talked yet. Why don't you introduce yourself, and please, by all means. Viv, you're on mute.
Okay, I'm in. Hi, I'm Vivian Morsel. I have a doctor of audiology. I'm an audiologist retired from the Department of Defense. My issue happened 13 years ago. I had a high-level job, very high level, and I worked for a jerk. And I went to, and Jackie knows the story because every time I saw her, I'd tell her. And the problem was I went to EAO, whatever it's called, and they said, no, he's a jerk to everyone. I was the only female. And I don't even need to go into, what goes on in the workplace when they're a jerk. He says, because he's a jerk to everyone, you're not singled out. But what happens is, because I'm an audiologist and I was at Walter Reed, and I taught the tinnitus course. So what happens in the brain, the amygdala steps in. So with tinnitus, the problem we have with those who have tinnitus, when they wake up in the middle of the night or they have it in the morning, the amygdala puts the brain on, oh my God, there it is. Oh my God, and you're emotional. It's the reaction to that happens. But what I found is that to this day, every time I have to write an email, that he used to scrutinize all our papers, not just mine, but even the Air Force colonel who was the audiologist, he would make comments like, when you got your doctorates, did you use a crayon? Just insults. But to this day, I do have, issues when it comes to writing an email. I have to look it over, research it, get anxiety. What if I made a mistake? But that amygdala, when I lasted a year, and every time I went to work, I read right in that OODA loop, went right in, and I'd get into that anxiety. He's going to yell at me. I can't do anything right. So there is a lot of things that the best thing that happened to me was I couldn't do anything because he did it to everybody. But the best thing that happened was I was with American Corporate Partners, and I was a mentee, or I had a mentee. I was a protege. And she said, Vivian, I've worked HR for 30 years with IBM. Start looking for another job because you can't change him. And so that's exactly what I did. And I just transferred in the government services to a military, I went to Walter Reed. So yes, back to why I'm speaking is the fact that there was the reaction to what he put me in, and I would react every time I went to work. And to this day, under those situations, I look, I spent agonizing time trying to just do something. It's just an email. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's wicked.
No,
So-
I've been on the receiving end of, can you prove this for me?
Yes.
So
Yeah,
I
I'll
can
send it
vouch
to her. And
that you've done that. And
yeah.
but two things, Viv. I think so the one is, oh, he's not a bully. He treats everybody like that.
Yes.
I'm not a racist. I hate everybody. I'm not so I think it becomes the way we excuse bad behavior by saying, well, he's not a bad guy because he's just mean to everybody. So I think one, and I think I'm going to ask either Jerry or maybe Nan how do we respond to when he's just mean to everybody? What do we do with a guy like that? And then Viv, I want to remind you of a conversation that we once had, and maybe you and Jennifer need to talk about the audiology. I think you once explained there was a presentation about hearing and hearing loss and hearing issues, and how when you're not hearing things right, there was that element related to suicide.
So who wants to go first?
I can talk a little bit to that because
Yep.
somebody just put something in the
the
chat about stop taking it so personal. It is personal, and the only thing you can do is push back, and that's the only thing I've learned to do to survive and help myself. And in the beginning, if you're like a nice person and you don't want to have conflict in your life, because maybe you were raised with a lot of conflict like I was, you do what you can to avoid it, but it doesn't help. You actually have to say to somebody like, well, what makes you think I use crayons, or what kind of mark is that? Or you actually have to get kind of rude yourself back to these people. You have to notice that they're not bullying everybody. They're picking on you for a reason because you're taking it. And that's not to put anybody down. You were probably raised with these rules and, ideas and social norms that you weren't supposed to.
No, it was like Nick Bambia Diamond. I had a little red book during our staff meetings, and I would write, and I'd write, and I'd write. And that colonel one day said, Viv, at least you look like you're engaged and you're taking notes. We're just sitting there and getting embarrassed. And I said, let me show you my notebook. I opened it up, and it says over and over and over, just take the shit, you have a mortgage. Just take the shit, you have a mortgage. Because it was a big job. And I couldn't just say, well, you're not nice, I'm going to quit. You had to suck, just like Bia Diamond said, you just sucked it up. So instead,
you can't do this. You can't do this if it's been going on for a long time. You have to do this when it's new, right? Because they already know you. They've sussed you out. They know what all your weaknesses is. We're talking about predators here, right?
Right.
We're talking about people who may come on as really nice in the beginning and like they're your best friend, so they can find out everything they want to know about you, so they know how to get to you, right? And people do talk about using the gray rock technique, which is not responding, but you're inside, if this has been going on for a while, you are still responding. After a while, you cannot stop your amygdala. It is open all the time, and that's where the damage comes from.
Well, I got one option. There were no options. This is 13 years ago when we weren't even discussing bullying in the workforce. So my Marine widow friend, I'm a Gold Star wife. So Marine widow friend, she came over like 6 months after the job, and I had a voodoo doll from New Orleans. We got that voodoo doll out. And you know what? We stuck him in the best places ever. And it was very strategically done. We want pain in the feet. There's nothing worse than pain. Then we went for the head. And then we went to other places. But do you know that was September? In December, he had to take leave for headaches. So, and what we did was, when you don't feel like you have control, you have to find some displacement to make you feel, let's get them now. And it was the best night ever. And but that was, again, 13 years ago, 2010, when it wasn't prevalent, and the conditions. I had moved there from Camp Lejeune. I was in DC or Fort Detrick. So, but it was, I've learned a lot. I've learned as far as the hearing loss. What happens at Walter Reed? I loved it. I retired because my time was up. I really had worked in the workforce long enough, but I had a great time and I had a great position. And I was the lead for hearing aids, and I was the lead for tinnitus. And what happens there was two scenarios I will go into, and I went to the hearing for the tinnitus. It was a tinnitus caucus hearing, and a woman got up and said, my daughter committed suicide because of her tinnitus. So I'm sitting back there thinking, you don't commit suicide because of the tinnitus. When you get tinnitus, it's comorbid. There was an explosion. There's PTSD. It's a comorbid. The tinnitus doesn't kill you. It's all the other issues you have that created that tinnitus. Now you have the other end of that spectrum where you have an elderly patient that isn't getting hearing aids, and they are, in the workforce. They don't want to get hearing aids because that puts them in a disadvantage of promotion.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't ask questions because they are going to misinterpret what's being said. Think of someone with the hearing loss in the workplace as having them have English as a second language, because they have to use closure to translate what's being said. And if they answer incorrectly, that will be noticed to where, he doesn't have a good grip when he does answer questions on presentations. So in that respect, they are in a silent bully. There is that discrimination against them because, one, they're not wearing hearing aids, and even with hearing aids, you still aren't going to be 100% with good communication skills. So, and that's now I do compensation pension exams for the VA, and I teach hearing conservation. So with hearing conservation, there's OSHA laws. OSHA law in the workforce.
OSHA today.
Ear protection. OSHA law says you have to have a program. So OSHA should also have in these unions, and OSHA laws is OSHA law should have, there will be a bully-free a segment in your OSHA workplace for training. And even though the OSHA laws are for hearing conservation, OSHA can oversee other safety aspects, but safety is important.
Yes.
But anyways,
So,
I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that, because there was something about I when we talked once before about hearing loss, not always hearing everything right. That's
Processing.
Right.
It's auditory processing. Is
right.
It's what you do with what you hear. It's how you're processing that information. And that can happen with a traumatic brain injury. And with a traumatic brain injury, even though your hearing might be normal, we were putting hearing aids on normal hearing service members with traumatic brain injury, because by increasing the auditory signal, it helped with processing. But
Right.
yeah, it is because they go back to having a significant hearing loss and they don't have one.
Yes. All right. Well, I'm going to go back to the queue, because I see Niekman has had his hand up, and then I see Evie has her hand up, and then I see Jessica has been in the chat a lot. Maybe you'll want to make some more comments for maybe everybody to hear. But Niekman, you're next.
Oh, yes, ma'am. When it comes to Ms. Fraser, I gotta add to what she was saying, because when she mentioned suicide, it really struck a chord though for me as well, because for a long time I was afraid to share this, but I'm comfortable to share it now. Around 2016 or 17, well, from 2015 through 2017, I was suicidal because everything was just added up though with bullying and personal problems and getting over a woman that just added up though. But I'm glad I didn't go through it. And that same feeling came up again though lately. And I will be honest, it scared me. I was so scared because that's one of the scariest feelings you can ever deal with though. Like you're really struggling, and to make it worse though, it seems like nobody cares if you live or not, or no one cares though. It makes it so much worse. But in my case though, it was out of a place of frustration because I'm trying so hard to better myself, but it really can though like be a struggle though. And that's why I'm gonna say though, like when you're just told just to be quiet and get over it, that's not gonna help though. It's not gonna help though if you don't seek your healing. And as much as I encourage other people to seek their healing, I want to be that example that seeking your healing though, helps though, because a good friend of mine named Abraham Scully said that we need Jesus in therapy because the Bible says faith without works is dead. And that is so true though, because yes, we need Jesus, yes, we need prayer, but when it comes to the work though, we do need therapy. Therapy is the work though. Therapy will help you to better understand why you're struggling what you're struggling with, and the therapy will help you to realize, oh, here are the things I need to do though. Hit the gym, get the right job though. For me, get involved in therapeutic activities like get more rest, change my diet, and things like that. And around 2019 though, things got a lot better though in my healing once I let go of that woman that I nearly deleted myself over. And what helped me though was going back to work, hitting the gym, and just working on myself, and realizing that I'm here for a reason. And I don't know how many people are wrestling fans, but there's a wrestler named Cody Rhodes, and he has a storyline where he says finish the story. And that's what keeps me going now though. I got to finish my story. I haven't gotten to the best chapter of the story yet. What if I'm on the verge of the best chapter? And that why I would tell anyone who's struggling with those kind of thoughts, finish your story, endure. You can heal from it and bounce back though from it though, because you are mortal than what any mean word though say. And I'm glad I'm here because like that young lady I had to get over, like what keeps me going now is the fact that hey, I had to let her go when it was for the best. And of course my validation doesn't come from her, and me focusing on my healing though help me to realize that. So I'll just encourage anyone who's being bullied anywhere and having those thoughts though, seek your healing and finish your story.
Yes. No, thank you. And I love what you just said about self-care and making that a priority, because when we don't take care of our health, we have a lot of other wants, but when it's your health, it's got to come first. Trust me, I'm recovering from hip surgery. If you haven't noticed, I'm kind of fidgety around. It's not because I'm loving everything you're saying. It's because my back and leg hurt. So I saw Nan had a comment, and I know Evie is in the queue waiting.
I just wanted to mention that there are studies supporting post-traumatic resilience too. So once you get through the post-traumatic stress disorder, you will be stronger. So there's something to hang on to and hope for, right? And that they're doing a lot of studies about that. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Okay. No, I again, I think the research that's out there, I mean, I've been excited to see how much has grown in just the few years that I've started doing this work. Evie, I know you've been patiently waiting. So before we get on any other tangents.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. It's good to see your face here. It's not easy for me to share here, and so I would like what I share here to remain confidential. I know you guarantee that. I have to tell you a little bit of my background because later on you will understand why. I grew up in a culture, let's just say, that values boys over girls, and I had a very abusive upbringing. And despite all that, I overcame it. I was selected on a technology exchange program, got out of my home country, and moved here. And later on, I was recruited for a management job here in Southern California. And then the company before I got in, I did not know it was very dysfunctional. And so I had my first experience of being bullied by my boss. I did not file suit because I was here on a visa. I am Canadian, and so after a couple of years, I got married, and then unfortunately, it turned into domestic violence, and so it took me a couple of years to recover. And I got back into my professional game in 2020, and I started working for a government agency. I knew I was overqualified, but I wanted stability. And 2 months into it, I discovered their wrongdoing. I didn't want to rock the boat because I want job security. I wanted, I figured I would, from now on, I'm not going to rely on anybody. I never rely on anybody. I just wanted this job to be my last job. But then a year and a half into it, they gave me another program for which I found out even, bigger wrongdoing. And I went to them very diplomatically. I didn't just give them the issues, I gave them a solution. And I also, put some very diplomatically soft languages in the contract, right, to cover their tracks and stuff. But still, that's not good enough. The promotion promised to me was taken away, and I started seeing the writings on the wall, and that's fine. I told my boss, I said, I'm not here for recognition. I'm not asking for money, promotion. I just want access to do good work, and that's what I said. But then one day it was my performance review, and then his boss was also in a meeting, and they started blaming me for causing 8 months delay on the project. And I was frozen there. I could not say much. I went back and I did a post-mortem analysis of the past few months that I was involved in the program, and I said, nothing has ever stayed on my desk for more than 24 hours. And all my performance reviews have been rated 3.95 out of 4. So, and I can tell they are retaliating because I whistle-blew them. And so there was a section in the performance review I can provide my comments to. So I put a very soft and brief comment there, and I said, taxpayers are ultimately my employer, and I have discrepancy with my superiors, and I have to maintain my level of professionalism. And that's what I said there, because I knew somehow this is, at least I have something in the writing. So I said all of this because I'm afraid that when I talk to attorneys, and they said, because you have a history of abuse and PTSD, and they're gonna say, oh, when you came to us, you're already damaged good. But the thing is that when I started working there, I wasn't taking medication. I was not seeing a therapist. I was like doing well, and my performance reviews records can attest to that. But the attorneys I talked to, they said to claim emotional damages, you can only you have to prove there is a reactivation of your PTSD, and that you can only claim that incremental part. And what I'm really afraid is that, is what they said about me being the damaged good. And with the little, research I did, I understand that, like people like me, there's like a repetition compulsion. And from what I read here, is like analogies can sometimes be made to battered spouses syndromes or other chronically injured individuals who are unable to escape the tormentors, right? And then also there's a degree of psychological captivity involved in a workplace where like job relationships carry much more psychological significance than simply a place to make a living, right? And then what really dawned on me is that the importance of the workplace is like further enhanced by the psychodynamics of relationships. It's almost like replicates the early childhood experiences, with the various like coworkers playing the roles of parents, children, siblings, and all that. And I want to say that after I whistleblow them, two months after, I was diagnosed with cancer, and I let them know. I put them on notice, and I continue to work full time and I was waiting for the further surgery schedule, right? And then I think one day after the ultrasound, I got really sick and I asked for the rest of the afternoon off. And that's when they fired me. And they said it's my performance issue. And at that time, I had less than 2 weeks left in my insurance. And so I was actually waiting for a second opinion so that I don't have to go through that surgery, because it's about my reproductive organ. But then I was so afraid that it's gonna get worse. So I just had to make a hasty decision to go through with that surgery. And I felt, when I was like waiting for my surgery, 5 o'clock in the hospital, I just felt like I didn't even have a say over my body as a woman. I mean, I could have like just walked away from it, but this is really too much. If anything, if I don't stand up for myself this time around, how am I gonna be okay with myself? So that's why but there's such a big huge amount of guilt and shame about me. I have not worked since the end of 2021, and I felt like the attorneys I talked to, they said you have a legal obligation to mitigate the situation. But I just felt, I don't know, I just felt like I could not bring myself up. I don't have that confidence. Anyway, I just wanted to share here, and I wanted to, kind of belong, and I wanted to hear other people's stories. I want to draw inspiration. I want to derive values from what I've gone through. I want to get better. So that's where I'm at. Thanks.
Yeah, no, Evie, so thank you so much for sharing. I know how hard and personal that is. And I know there are some research that talks about how stress and cancer are related. And I do hope we can find you and that you're going to stay connected with us. I see a bunch of people in the chat here look like wonderful people for you to stay connected with. You are not alone. You have community. I think Jennifer wanted to add something, and then I'm going to ask for like some closing remarks because I know we're at almost an hour and a half already. But Jennifer, please.
I just wanted to say that, Evie, the way you've been treated is incredibly appalling, and you have an unbelievable spirit. You are resilient. You are smart. You are talented. Don't let anyone take any of those things away from you. You are the last person on the planet who's damaged goods. You are spectacular. And I'm not saying those things to be nice. I actually believe it and mean it based on what you just told us. So a friend of mine, Elizabeth Gould, has written a book called Feeling Forwards. She's a cancer survivor, and her book is incredibly empowering and moving and striking. And she's got lots to say. And just Elizabeth Gould is the most elegant woman I've ever spoken to. She's brilliant beyond belief. And she said to me at one point, she said, yeah, at a certain point, I found out that cancer really likes sugar. Cancer cells glom onto sugar. So I took the sugar out and I shut those fuckers down. I was like, oh my gracious. But when you're fighting, you need that fighting language. And you just don't stop. You're amazing. And you have found a great community. These are all caring, smart people who've been through hell like you have, and they're not stopping. And you can't stop either, taking care of yourself and creating the life you need and want.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Nan, were you looking to chime in as well?
No, but I really was identifying with Evie's story. You know, I think we've all lived through a version of it, and that's part of the real shame of what we're going through. Bullying is easy to identify, and it's repetitious behavior, and we all end up, you know, financially, emotionally, and physically damaged from it. And we all need to work together to make our voices heard and to get it to stop. You know, we need to let our representatives know we want this bill to pass. Any bill to pass. One bill will pass, another bill will pass. We just need a state to do it, right? A real bill, not the training law that we have in California, which is entirely inadequate because it doesn't address changing group social norms. But you know, I really feel for everybody here who has been sharing their story.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you can hear the common threads in some of the stories, the things Evie said, Viv said, Nickman said, Scotty said. I mean, they're all different people, different parts of the country, different parts of the world. And yet there is that common thread, that common dialogue that so what a bully does is they take away our power, or they make us believe we don't have power. And so I often say that we own our narrative. Nobody takes that away from us. We own our narrative. And yes, these bad things happen to good people, and we've been hurt, and there have been lots of trials and tribulations, and you know, and the answers are not always the same. You know, go out and get another job. Well, for some people that might be easier than for others. Move to another state, again, might be easier for some than others. Retire, get married, don't eat sugar. I mean, these are all these different things. Make a voodoo doll. Maybe Vivian, we can have a voodoo doll night session. We've been talking about what is restorative justice, and what are some of the things we can do to make ourselves feel better. So maybe we'll have a voodoo doll night.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's very cathartic. It's so cathartic, especially when he had to take leave with headaches. I felt the power.
So I yes, feel the power. So I think just the sharing our stories and the being together, I think for me is why I started Whistleblowers of America. It was after connecting with somebody randomly on LinkedIn who I believe was a Navy veteran, law enforcement officer. And when she told me she had a gun, it just put me into a place where I was like, hey, this is my career. This is what I know how to do. I know how to respond to trauma. I know what suicide prevention is. Here we are 5 years later, and on a Tuesday night, a room full of strangers have gotten together to focus and help with healing. So I'm going to ask if Jennifer, Jerry, or Nan have any other closing remarks before, you know, we let people maybe go eat dinner or check kids' homework or whatever you guys have to do tonight.
I would just say super fast for people to remember, hurt brains hurt. While your brain hurts inside, the person that's hurting you actually has such a damaged brain that can be seen on a brain scan that you don't even want to envy them. They are, you know, people are talking about narcissists and stuff. When they look at those guys, or I don't mean male, when they look at those people, they really have severely damaged brains, and that's why they do what they do. And that should give you a certain amount of power to know that you're face to face with someone who's really ill, and it's not about you. You just need to learn how to survive it. Don't let it hurt you, etc. But hurt brains hurt.
Mm-hmm. And hurt people. Jerry?
Yeah, I you know, unfortunately, I think what I would say is, you know, we have miles to go. And, but the reality is that the only way we get there is we need to build a movement. And building a movement means that we need all organizations working together rather than working against each other. And so, I hope that all of us will step back and think about being part of that movement and part of a coalition of organizations that all have the same goal of protecting targets who have a human right to dignity that should be respected in the workplace.
And Nan?
All I have to say is work should not hurt. And I really appreciate everybody here tonight.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. I'm always so excited when I see so many people participating. Please, please, please make sure that you've shared your contact information in the chats. Connect with each other. You don't need me to keep moving forward with making these great connections. Paul will keep posting things on social media for us. We are trying to make these roundtables monthly meetings. We've been doing them in the evenings, trying to catch people after work. We've tried to do some like at midday to also try to catch more of the international people. So let us know, we're interested in your feedback. Are these roundtables working for you? What else? Other topics? We're already planning for some of the sessions for 2024. So if you have ideas, if you want to be a discussant, if you've got a book, an idea, a legislation, something that we can be capitalizing or sharing, please let me know. We do these, what is this, the third Tuesday of every month? I can't even remember anymore. Yeah, I think it's the third Tuesday of every month. I think next month, Roundtable, we're going to be talking about military and veteran whistleblowers. We do hear from a lot of active duty who face a bunch of different issues and national security concerns. So they've asked for a panel. So I know that's coming up in November. I don't think we've got anything planned for December because of those pesky holidays that might get in the way. But we will keep you posted, and we will, hopefully get to see more of you and continue these conversations next month. So thank you. Paul, anything I forgot? Are you there? Are you listening to me?
You nailed it.
Paul is our vice president. He's kind of he likes to be more in the background. But he's really an amazing IT cyber guy. So please, a round of applause for Paul, who helps us put all this together. And it's him and his little crew of volunteers that helps with all our social media. So if you know anybody else who wants to volunteer, please let us know. And there's his company running name. Thank you, Paul. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a good evening, and we will see you next month.